Hello, friends. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking about the importance of getting good sleep, including talking about some of the common threats to getting good sleep when going through divorce, and some ideas that I can share with you about good sleep hygiene. I'm going to share with you one thing that's surprising to a lot of people in terms of advice about getting good sleep. So stay tuned. Welcome to Being Dad After Divorce, the podcast that gives you tips on how to cope with your divorce, both during separation and after. And this is episode 11. I'm your host, John Peters, and thanks for joining me in this episode. So, today I'm going to talk a little bit about sleep. And sometimes people don't think proactively about their sleep because we see sleep more as often a barometer of stress. So we have a really bad day and we don't sleep well, or something outside of us competes with sleep, like we get awakened by noise in the neighborhood or something like that. Um, Often people aren't focusing on good sleep hygiene, but during a period of prolonged stress, sleep can get disrupted by the stress. It can get disrupted by things that are going on and in the situation, and also ways that we're coping or not coping well. And the number one reason why I think you need to pay attention to your sleep hygiene is that bad sleep, in terms of how it affects our brain, is basically the opposite of taking an antidepressant. You already know this. Everybody has had a night of really bad sleep and noticed the day afterward you have lower energy, you're more irritable, you don't deal with challenging issues as well, you're more prone to conflict, you feel more emotionally raw, you tend to have a more of a negative tone of your emotional quality. And why does that happen? Because our brain needs sleep. Our brain needs sleep to recharge itself and to perform optimally. All right. So let me talk a little bit about some common threats to sleep quality. And then I'll give you some advice about some things that I suggest to my clients to help them try to improve their sleep hygiene. Okay. I'm going to start with the most surprising one that a lot of people don't think about, and that is the one of the biggest threats to sleep quality is drinking alcohol. This may seem backwards because when we have a drink of alcohol, the alcohol tends to be sedating. And in fact, people often do find that they fall asleep more quickly when they're drinking alcohol. So our brains associate that with alcohol equals better sleep. In fact, alcohol equals poorer sleep. They've done studies where they compared drinkers, moderate drinkers, and heavy drinkers. And the people who sleep the best on average are the non drinkers. Even moderate drinkers don't sleep as well as non drinkers, right? And why is this? Because when we regularly drink alcohol, our body tries to counteract the sedation of the alcohol to keep us awake by overproducing cortisol, which is one of the main stress hormones. So if you're drinking daily, what you're doing is you're training your body to start producing more stress hormones that tend to wake you up, okay, which is what the body's trying to do in response to the alcohol. But cortisol has a really long period of time where it wears off. So just like stress can creep into our sleep because the stress of the day hasn't left our body by the time we're trying to lie down and get good sleep, cortisol, whatever the reason it's being produced, is going to stick around and be dysregulated into our sleep cycle. Okay. So, stress management techniques can lower cortisol. Some medications can help lower cortisol. Some supplements lower cortisol. But one of the ways you can lower your cortisol so that you sleep better is drink less alcohol. Okay. And I made a podcast episode all devoted to alcohol. If you want to watch that one, I'll put a link up here at the top. So keep your alcohol low and you will sleep better. All right. Other threats that I hear from dads going through divorce are the anxieties that cause what we call rumination or worry. And a lot of these are difficult to let go of because the things that you're worried about are often substantive and important. Okay. So let's say that you think you need to sell the house, and then it's like 3 a.m. and you wake up and you think, oh my God, if we're going to sell the house, we got to sell it by a certain date, or we got to get an appraiser to appraise it, or we got to fix such and such on the house for it to be ready to sell, or we got to contact a real estate agent. All those things are important. There's substance to them. Do you need to be awake and thinking about them at 3 a.m.? No. But when we're stressed out, and I've talked about this in other videos, the higher our stress goes, the more it's likely that the glue will kick in, the mental glue that sticks us to the thing we're worried about. Okay. One of the strategies that I share with people going through divorce is keep a notebook handy, both when you're awake and by your bed. And if you think of some random thing, just write it in your notebook. Okay. I made a whole podcast episode about that. It was called Brain Hack Number One, I think. And the reason that can help is that just like when you make a shopping list, and thus you can stop trying to think about all the items that you need to buy. If you write something in your notebook, your brain will allow you more readily to unhook from it and get back to sleep. Okay. And not be lying awake in bed trying to juggle these important things that your brain doesn't want to lose track of. Okay. So that's a common thing. If it's happening to you, you're not crazy, but it definitely can diminish sleep quality. The things we worry about when we're awake produce cortisol, which lowers sleep quality. And we can also not get to sleep or wake up too early or wake up in the middle of the night and think about things that we're worried about. And then we don't want to lose them. So our brain doesn't want to go to sleep because we don't want to lose track of the thing. Plus, since we're worried about it, then we're stressed out and we're producing cortisol, which wakes us up. Okay. So stress management techniques help with that. I'll continue to talk about a variety of those in this series. But keeping a notebook around is one of the handy ways to lower your stress and not have to burden your conscious mind with juggling all of the important things that you're thinking about with all the complex changes and challenges that you're facing in your situation. Okay. Another issue that is a threat to sleep quality for a lot of people is drinking caffeine too late in the day, or drinking and loading up too much with too much caffeine during the day. Caffeine is a molecule that we take in often through sodas, energy drinks, and coffee and tea, and it binds to the receptors in our body that gives us that energy, but then we flush it through our kidneys. Some people are real efficient flushers and they can drink coffee later in the day and then flush it by the time they need to go to sleep. However, some people are slow flushers. And if that's you, then you got to know your cutoff time. So just don't drink caffeine after noon or after 2 p.m. or whatever it is for you, in order for that to not still be lingering at the time where you're trying to fall asleep and get restful sleep. Another threat to sleep that I've noticed with a lot of people is trying to escape their mental pain, their emotional pain by social media, scrolling on their phone, or endless channel surfing on the television. Because I talk to a lot of people and I say, why are you not getting good sleep? And they're like, I'm not going to bed early enough. And so I ask, what are you doing before you go to bed? Often it's like 3 hours of scrolling on the phone. Okay. That's something you can cut down. All right. Does it mean you shouldn't scroll on your phone ever at all? Not necessarily. But, if you're regularly engaging in video games, phone scrolling, television, activities that aren't necessarily constructive, or you don't need to be doing that much, but they're impinging on your opportunity to sleep, then you need to modify that. Okay. Another threat to sleep is often poor organization. So sometimes people are, yeah, and obviously, the things that we have to do in our life are not fully under our control, right? But sometimes thinking about when you do what can matter in terms of both, like when you get stuff done and thus can go to sleep, but also when you do things that are more likely to help you wind down, right? So sometimes people put off certain tasks until 11 p.m. and then they start this thing and then they get involved in it and it's something that might wake them up, right? And so you might need to figure out, how do you plan your day so that you get the things done that you need to get done in order to have the opportunity to go to sleep early enough so you're going to get decent sleep, right? And by the way, what I'm talking about in terms of good sleep is not X number of hours. I mean, in general, if you talk to the sleep doctors, they say 6+ hours a night, but that's variable across individuals. What I tend to think about in terms of good sleep versus bad sleep is, are you waking up more often than not feeling rested? Okay. What percentage of the mornings when you wake up do you feel like you got restful sleep? Okay. And for some people, that might be 8 hours of sleep. For some people, it might be 6 hours of sleep. Okay. The other thing is, bad sleep doesn't necessarily mean it's bad because you woke up in the middle of the night and were partially awake or maybe fully awake for a bit before you went back to sleep, because that's a very common thing. A lot of people don't fall asleep and sleep one uninterrupted long session of sleep before they wake up. So if you're waking up in the middle of the night and going back to sleep, that's not necessarily a big deal, because it's really, do you wake up in the morning feeling rested? That's the criterion. Another thing that helps people with sleep is exercise. Often when I talk to people who begin a regular program, which means exercising more days than not, at least to a moderate level of intensity, and for 30 to 40 minutes plus, a lot of those people report that their sleep quality goes up. Okay. Now, let's talk a little bit. I mentioned that alcohol makes sleep worse. Okay. And too much caffeine too late in the day can make sleep worse. But let's talk about some things that people do to take in stuff to make sleep better. Sometimes people go to their doctor and ask for a sleep aid, which is reasonable. I tend to recommend that people talk to their doctor about not taking something that's addictive. Like, I'm not a fan of the benzodiazepines like Xanax and Ativan and things like that. So I tend to promote the idea that people talk to their doctor about something that's most benign. For a lot of people, that's melatonin. For a lot of people, that's Benadryl or hydroxyzine. And those are pretty mild and they're not addictive. They're well tolerated. But again, if you're having chronic poor sleep, you might talk with your doctor and see if they're willing to prescribe something or give you advice about doing something that's relatively benign, that's not addictive, and doesn't have a lot of side effects, right? Personally, I'm not a fan of people going to the heavy-hitting, super sedative kinds of drugs because they have issues with side effects and issues of dependence. Sometimes people go to the pharmacy or the health food store and look for supplements. And I'm not a doctor. I can't give you medical advice. I'm not evaluating you medically. But I'll say some of the popular supplements that people often experiment with for improved sleep do include melatonin, L-theanine. Some people take ashwagandha. I'm not a fan of that. There's some controversy about toxicity with that one. Some people take herbal GABA, GABA. Some people take passion flower. Some people take lemon verbena, lemon balm. So, you can check those out. But here's some advice about trying supplements. If you are trying supplements, maybe Google them so you're somewhat educated about it. Consider talking about that with your doctor, see what their opinion is. And I'm also not a fan of necessarily going to the health food store or the pharmacy and getting those cocktails that have like 5 different things for sleep in it, which may work for you. But part of the problem with that is you may not know which of those is working well for you, or if it has a side effect that you don't like, you don't know which thing in there caused it. So trying one thing at a time, I think, is better than taking something that has 4 or 5 different things in it all at once, right? The most common supplement that people take for sleep is melatonin. And that was a little tricky because the dosing range is anywhere from 1 milligram to 20 milligrams. So you kind of have to figure out how much do I need to take nightly to get better sleep, but not too much. And too much melatonin won't give you a lot of side effects or overdose you, but it tends to make people feel like they're not waking up as quickly the next morning, basically. So that's just personal experiment to figure out what your dosing might be if you're going to experiment with melatonin. But you can get it in 1 milligram, 2 milligrams, 3, 5, 10 milligram gummies and pills. So it's pretty easy to adjust the dose to find the right dose that might work for you to help you get better sleep, right? So I do encourage you to think about your sleep hygiene because you're going through a period of prolonged stress. That stress may negatively impact your sleep, so you need to do things to counteract that. But you also need to try to get good sleep because better sleep puts our brain in a better mode to be able to handle that stress. When we're wonked out because of bad sleep, we don't handle our stress as well. And when we don't handle our stress as well, the subjective stress load on us gets bigger regardless of what the stressor is. Okay, so it's a spiral that can get worse if we don't do something about it with the stuff we can control. And again, can you control all of the factors that influence your sleep? No. Some things that are influencing your sleep are out of your control, but some are more in your control or somewhat in your control, as I've talked about here today. And so I encourage you to kind of think about how you can do things to make it more likely that you'll get restful sleep more of the time, right? So thanks for joining me today. And if you're yet to subscribe to the channel, please subscribe. If you like this kind of content, hit the like button below. If you have comments, like things that have helped you get good sleep, please comment those below as well. And if you'd like to work with me personally, I have an online coaching group for divorced dads. And if you go to fatherhoodforward.com, you can see how to easily get into my community. I have multiple weekly group coaching calls where I talk to dads about the issues they're facing and give them advice based on my decades of experience working with separated parents. I'd love to have you in the group if you'd like to get that type of support. All right. So thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next episode.